this is something that can truly give you some sort of competitive advantage if the people, on your team, or especially the people that you're playing against, aren't taking their in-season training seriously, like you hopefully are. You can make absolutely really big strides compared to them. Um, Here we go. Okay, why I think in-season training is so important here. Um, when we're thinking about the yo-yo effect that can happen from the off season to the in season, if you're not training, right, you make all this really great progress in the off season, whether you're looking at performance in terms of your on ice performance, or your speed, your strength, your power, your conditioning, all of that. We have this really nice trend upwards. And then if you're someone, you decide, I'm not going to train in season because I'm too busy with my schedule and with school or with work or anything, you have this gradual decline in your performance. And if we're looking at kind of the duration of these in-season and off-season periods, we can see that the in-season period is longer than the off-season period. So although this graph shows us kind of getting back to the same point, we could actually end up getting worse than where we finished in the last offseason, because the timeline in that season is so much longer. So when we're looking at this over the course of 2 years here, but we could stretch this out to 3 or 4 years, there is no development being made here. So every single offseason, you're entering the same exact point. Every single offseason, you're finishing at the exact same point. But this might be okay when you're 13, 14, 15 years old. But when you're 18, 19, 20 years old and other players have been training in season and you physically are the exact same player, you're going to get jumped ahead by your other players. So from a development standpoint, like, you're really missing out if you're not training in season. But then from an actual performance standpoint too, like, you're going into the most important time of the season extremely underprepared. So in a time when the games matter the most and you want to be at your fastest, your strongest, your most well conditioned, you're entering that point of the year at your weakest, your least conditioned, and your slowest across the entire season. So both from a development and from a performance standpoint, which I think is really important to look at off ice training from both of those lenses. If you're not in season training, you are really, really missing the boat. But then in season training, like, what does that actually entail, right? You kind of need to uh, run the gamut here of the different qualities that you're hitting, because detraining happens really fast if you're not training certain qualities. So when we're thinking about kind of the uh, five main buckets of physical qualities, we can look at aerobic endurance here, maximum strength, anaerobic glycolytic endurance. So this is kind of our lactic based conditioning, strength endurance, which is more hypertrophy, and then maximum speed. All of these start to degrade at certain time points. So all that means is if I don't train something like aerobic endurance, pure aerobic endurance, for 30 days, I can still maintain my values. But something like speed, if I don't train that every 5 days, those qualities are going to start to degrade. So something like maximum speed, that's super important that you're consistently working that in your routine, and that's something that you're not maybe getting on the ice in your practices or your games. So that's something that you have to really make a point of emphasis moving forward in your off ice. Now the glycolytic endurance and likely the aerobic endurance, that's stuff that can get handled with what's going on in the ice and the practices, because we are going to be getting conditioning components there. But the max strength, the strength endurance, and the max speed, like, that's stuff that we have to start thinking about. Okay, if I need to do some hypertrophy work every 2 weeks, or if I need to do max strength work, once a month, how do I go about that? Because obviously we can't also just do strength work once a month and think that you're not going to get sore from that. You can still maintain your qualities, but how do I work that in my routine so that when I do the true max strength set or max strength workout, my body is prepared for that. So a couple staples that we think about of how to minimize that soreness realistically, because we're looking to improve performance, but not so much that we're sore and it's going to limit us with what we can do on the ice. So couple ways that we want to minimize soreness. We want to keep the intensity high and the sets and reps low. So intensity high, volume low. And I always like to use this example. If I'm a runner, I'm going to go out and I'm going to run a marathon one day. which is pretty low intensity, but this huge volume of work. And then another day, I'm going to run a max effort 100-meter sprint. Which one of those is going to make me sore? It's going to be the marathon. And obviously, that's an extreme example of the highest volume that you can possibly think of when it comes to, a running activity. But the 100-meter sprint is the highest intensity that we can get. The speeds that we're going to hit on that are going to be much, much, much higher than a marathon. But that's not the stuff that makes us sore. It's volume that makes us sore. So that's running, but lifting, sprinting, jumping, that's all kind of the same thing too. So when we're thinking about structuring the workouts, we want to keep the weights as high as possible. We want to keep the speeds as high as possible. We want to keep the sets and reps really low. So that's why in our in-season domination programs, you'll see a lot of, sometimes even 2 sets, but a lot of times 3 sets. Everything is generally like 3, 4, 5 reps. There's maybe some core and hip stuff that's a little bit higher rep, but all of our main movement stuff is really low sets and reps. Use familiar exercises, right? This maybe is hard for people to wrap their heads around, because when you're going through training consistently, if you're doing the same type of session over and over again, that can get really monotonous. But monotonous is what gets you better, because you need to continuously do the same exercises in order to add more weight or add more speed, so that you can constantly push your body to adapt. And then with that, like if you're constantly doing trap bar deadlift, for example, that might make you sore the very first time you do it, but the second time you do it, your body's adapted to it, and now you're not going to get sore. Third time you do it, your body's adapted even more, and you definitely won't be getting sore. So using familiar exercises is really important, because if I'm just, kind of pulling all these different exercises all the time and my body's not ready for what's getting thrown at it, that's when we get a lot of either fatigue or muscle soreness. Something I think that's really overlooked with in season is using push dominant exercises. So something that causes a lot of soreness is eccentric movement. So if you've done an off season program, eccentric movements, and we're doing this slow lowering to the bottom on, say, a squat. We start up, we squat down really, really slow. But every single movement has an eccentric component. If we think about just a normal squat, we start up at the top, we lower down, and we come back up. We might only lower for a second, but that still has an eccentric component to it, where under load, the muscle fibers are getting pulled apart. When we do a slow tempo, they're getting pulled apart really slowly. On a faster tempo, they're still getting pulled apart, but just at a higher speed. That can cause these little micro tears that can create a lot of soreness. So if we think about how do we minimize that eccentric lowering, you can do something like a trap bar deadlift, where like you're set up at the bottom, like me here in this picture, you stand up all the way to the top, and you can essentially drop to the bar if you want. The bar is going to drop all the way to the ground. You don't have to worry about the eccentric lowering of it. Step up's kind of the same way. You can step up and not even really control your body on the way down. And then sled marching, that's just straight concentric. You have no eccentric load on that at all. So working in things like that help reduce the eccentric component of all these lifts. Using overcoming isometrics is another thing. So if you've done these will be the barbell bench press isos, where you're pushing into a rack and it can't move. Or if you're somebody who's done a home program, you set up the towel underneath your feet and you can do deadlift isos that way. It's the same idea. There's no eccentric component to it, so you don't have to worry about the muscle fiber tearing. Also with that, there's just no concentric movement when you're actually doing the lifting. So you're minimizing the eccentric movement doing that as well. And then staying consistent is maybe the most important. And that goes back to the residual training effects from the previous slide. But if you, follow the rest of these bullet points right above this, so you keep your intensity high, you use the same exercises, you use push dominant exercises, but you train once and then you don't train again for 3 weeks, you can do the same exact session and it can be the best session in the world. But if you don't train for 3 weeks, you're going to be sore. So staying consistent, making sure that you're getting 1 to 2 lifts a week is super important to make sure that your body is familiar with everything that you're doing. And I know everyone's schedule is a little bit different, and it makes it really challenging sometimes. But this is something that I talked about in the in-season domination program. I talked about it last year, and if you're going to buy this year's program, I'll talk about it again. Like the Boston Bruins schedule, the team that I work with, we have the most hectic schedule in the world playing in the NHL. We have, on average, 3.5 games a week. We practice around that. We get 1 day off, but we have to travel. there's a lot of different factors in there. And if we looked at our schedule and we picked out the game days, the off days, and then we said, okay, we don't want to train, we don't want to work out in the gym the day before a game because I'm too nervous about being sore. We legitimately would not have trained for an entire month. So there's always a way that you can do it. You can train the day before a game and just make sure that the volume, like we talked about, is in the right spot so that you're not sore. You can train post game, and maybe that's when you do something that, uh, if we're looking at the spectrum of high and low volume, is more on the high volume side because you don't have to worry about being sore because you just had a game. So you're going to be sore anyways. So structuring your workouts to make sure it works to your schedule is possible regardless of what your schedule is. And then a couple other things like hold yourself to a high standard. I know for a lot of younger players where you might not have a team strength and conditioning coach, not everyone is, doing their own workouts. And it's really easy to say, like, well, I don't want to seem like the odd man out and kind of go out of my way to train because I want to be cool. I want to be with this group of kids. But you need to hold yourself to a higher standard. Like, you might need to do more than what's being asked of you if you really want to get to where you want to be. One of the things that I like to remind everyone of is, like, people all the time say, like, I would do anything to insert X. I would do anything to play on my high school team. I do anything to play college hockey. I do anything to make the NHL. But, like, would you train 2 times a week even if the rest of your team wasn't training? Would you do all your mobility work every single day? Would you uh, you know, get a strength and conditioning coach if your team doesn't have one and you're just kind of doing random exercises? Like, those are all really important things that you may need to do that other players on your team aren't. And then the biggest thing is, like, get a good training program, right? Like I said, like, if you're kind of pulling different exercises, you can do maybe follow all these things, but, like, if you don't know how to structure the workouts properly, you're not going to make as much progress as you want to. You might make some, but always getting a good training program is important. And we are releasing the in season domination soon. I think it's the best program we have written yet. I think every new program that we write, I learn from the previous one I wrote. So I truly think this one is going to be the best one so far. So if you guys are looking for a training program, definitely going to be the one that you want. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions about in-season training, but I think we're going to open it up to kind of answer any questions at all, moving forward here.